Call the meeting to order. Call the roll.
Trustee Healy.
Here.
Trustee Katsinas.
Here.
Trustee Milani.
Here.
Trustee Compass.
Here.
Trustee Reardon.
Here.
Trustee Radishevsky.
Here.
Mayor Peacock.
Here.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is approval of minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Katsinas.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole of October 7th, 2024.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Radishevsky.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Milani.
Aye.
Trustee Compass.
Aye.
Trustee Reardon.
Aye.
Mayor Peacock.
Aye. Next is rental property regulations and,
Point of order, non-scheduled.
what's that? Oh, non-scheduled citizens. Is there anybody here to speak? Anybody sign in for non-agenda, for agenda-specific items? Nope. Anybody here? Okay. Rental property regulations for discussion only, so if you don't mind giving us your, the presentation, that'd be great.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
Seems like
keep
it's
that
lagging.
microphone close because you're quiet.
Right, I'll do my best. So I'd just like to thank everyone. We did do some research on what you did asked us to do from back in March. I'd like to thank Sangeeta Santanam, who's the primary researcher on this project. She was not able to be here tonight, so I will be a pale facsimile of her presenter tonight.
She's saying speak up.
There you go.
Get closer to the mic.
All right.
So
back in-
closer to the mic is the big thing.
Back in March, the Board of Trustees passed an ordinance approving a temporary rental moratorium, and there were several reasons for this moratorium. In 2017, the Village of Orland Park was recognized as one of having the highest owner-occupied rate for housing. And there were some concerns that the rate of owner-occupied homes were dropping, and it had dropped, we found out, from 18.2% owner-occupied in 2017 down to 85.9% in 2022. There was also some concern in that large national institutional investors were buying up homes and converting them into rentals. Additionally, there was a desire to review and update the rental licensure regulations, especially in light of recent reports from the police department and code enforcement officers regarding the general public being scammed, and people were posing as landlords, etc. So those are the areas that we looked at. So there was a working group that was tasked for this project, and we sort of broke the challenge down into two stages. The first stage was research and data analysis, and basically this was making sure that we understood what the problem was and doing a deep dive into the data, data which we have in-house and also data available through the U.S. Census Bureau, both the 100% counts at the decennial census and the American Community Survey data, which is the sample data that's done every single month and then collated. So, and we also talked to some cities that have enacted rental density limits to see what worked and what did not work. We started to craft a solution to the problem, specifically for Orland Park, and we discussed at length various policies and ideas that should be reviewed and taken into consideration. And working with Gewalt Hamilton, we developed a GIS map as a primary tool to create a map of rental housing units in the village, and we looked at the next steps about how we would roll this program out in the timeline that we have set forward by the deadline and the general implementation procedures. So here's our first slide. So back in 2010, the renter-occupied units between 2010 and 2020, and now these are 100% counts from the decennial census. This is all housing units reporting. Renter-occupied units did increase from 2010 to 2020 by 4%, compared to 2% nationwide and 3% in Illinois. So moving on to the national institutional investors. We looked at our rental license records and identified 3 national investors who own rental housing in the village. They're Invitation Homes, and they are out of Chicago. And then we had 2 other institutional investors, one out of Texas and one out of Georgia. So our data indicates that since 2017, there have been about 11 additional units that have been acquired by these 3 national investors. These account for about 2% of the rental homes that we have in the village. While the percentage of ownership per se is not alarming, we have seen reports, again, that we mentioned earlier from the general public with some issues when these houses are being shown. The public was able to get access to the rental units through a keypad code, and there were reports of multiple people signing a lease agreement for the same unit. So there's definitely some cause for concern on this front from our perspective. So here's a list of the cities that have enacted rental density restrictions. Our working group did detail and review the ordinances that were passed by these cities, and we had many conversations with the planning staff in the city of Columbia Heights in Minnesota, and they shared their process with us and gave us a lot of valuable feedback. We also consulted the city of Champlain, Minnesota, with regard to developing a GIS rental density map. As you can see, the red boxes give us an idea of the rental units as a percentage of the total housing in each of these towns, and they vary between 10 to 40%. So we are at 14% right now. And according to U.S. Census data, we have about 3,200 rental units out of a total of 23,000 housing units in the village, and that's how we get to the 14%. So let's just talk about some definitions. So one is, what is an investor-owned residential property? Obviously, it's a unit that is not owner-occupied, and it's also not a unit that is developer-owned while the developer is waiting to sell the units. This term residential rental property, in this instance, applies to all types of rental properties, attached and detached single-family homes, townhomes, and condominiums. Which brings us to the next question of why do cities enact residential density restrictions? In speaking with some of the other cities, it's apparent that they were done primarily to promote home ownership and to help residents build equity in their homes. We were told that it also was a measure to combat increased code enforcement activity related to police, fire, emergency instances emanating from rental units. Literature review has also demonstrated a correlation between home ownership and neighborhood stability, and along with it, the maintenance of property values. And the next question, which is the most important question, is what is a rental density restriction? So rental density restriction is a restriction where the rental units are capped. In our case, it's going to be 10% per census block. The reason why we use census blocks as the geographic unit is because they're widely accepted and recognized. So what we do is we count the number of housing units in each census block, and the rental units are capped at 10% on this block. However, this rental density cap does not affect or will not affect the current people with current licenses. If they're over, they will be allowed to remain until they stop being rented or the ownership changes. It also does not affect any unit that has been pre-approved by the board as a rental. So if there was an apartment complex or an apartment building that has always been rental, those are not going to be subject to the cap.
How about condos? They would be subject to the cap?
Condos are subject to the cap. Yes. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to move to the solution and the proposed amendments of the current rental property registration. Oh, wait, one more here. So this is the calculations. So between 1 and 14 units will be 1 unit. So this is basically 10% with the rounding if there's a block.
It's math.
It's math. This is just the math. So this will be part of the ordinance.
Most of us here can do 10%, I think.
Yeah, there are some exceptions. These include housing units, again, that were developed as rental. Anyone who's active duty military personnel, they may have to rent their property temporarily while they're on active duty. And then there will be an exemption with some restrictions for snowbirds. Not so that it's a short-term rental, but it has to be between 5 and 6 months. Okay. So these are some of the amendments to our current rental property registration restrictions. One was that a landlord found in violation of the ordinance is prohibited from applying for a rental license for 1 year. That the landlord needs to submit a current plat of survey with the rental license application. The landlord or the owner's agent must be located within 15 miles of the village corporate limits. And this is to make sure that we have someone close by in case there's a problem. And also no more than 8 units may be managed by 1 owner's agent. So that's
Now, can we apply?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. And the other question I have is, can we limit the number that one investor purchases?
Yearly, they're given out on a yearly basis, so immediately will be January 1st.
Okay, so
But
yes,
yes,
we
for
can.
the next cycle. With regards to capping ownership, we cannot cap one entity from ownership. It's very difficult because, especially with investor-owned properties, they can easily form related entities and circumvent the cap. So the cap is more likely to be circumvented by the parties that we more would wish to restrict. So we've tried to do local focused restrictions that will make sure that there are people
On the ground
on
and
the
here?
ground locally here and control for it in that way.
Are we also putting in something to handle, I think we are, to handle the handing out of codes and the like to get into these? I think that's a separate to this, but.
That's the last item on here.
Okay.
Is that there must be an owner agent present to show a rental unit to the potential leases.
Okay.
Okay, so Wendy is our GIS person. She put this together to show the map.
Census blocks and are colored according to the number of rental licenses. Hello, and welcome to the demonstration of the Rental Density app. This is an interactive web mapping application that outlines the rental density across the village of Orland Park. It is designed to assist the public in determining where to apply for a rental license and the village to support the licensing process. The framework of the map are U.S. Census blocks and are colored according to the number of rental licenses available. The label on the blocks is the number of rental licenses available for that area. Clicking on the block will also return a pop-up with additional information, such as total housing units and the number of existing licenses. Looking at the legend, we can see the different areas are colored on a gradient from red to yellow, where the red shows 0 licenses available and the yellow shows 4 or more licenses available. There are 2 other shades to show pre-approved areas, as well as non-applicable ones. The symbology is reactive to the number of licenses submitted to the system and will change accordingly. The search bar at the bottom allows the user to navigate easily to specific addresses. There are also several helpful buttons in the upper right-hand corner. The layer list, a base map gallery, and an informational window that shows the breakdown of housing units per block and the rental units allowed. Let's take a look at the internal version of this application. Upon zooming in, we can actually see the locations of the different licenses and be able to retrieve information by clicking on them. Village staff also have access to an edit button, which allows them to add licenses to the system or modify existing ones. This concludes the demonstration of the rental density application. Thank you all so much for watching.
So there will be both an internal and an external version of this, just to make sure that we keep the privacy to the public. All they will be able to see is whether there are not a license available on that census block. And then again, inside, we will be able to maintain the proper list and the locations for our own purposes so that we can find things more quickly for our internal use on the GIS. Okay. Implementation procedures. So periodically, we will need to update the GIS map. That will be done probably as applications come in. We will also need to create interim census blocks based off of the rules that the census uses. The census only updates their maps every 10 years. So as we get new developments in, we will follow those same rules. And just really briefly, a census block is defined basically by standing on a corner and then continuing the street and keeping everything to your right until you get back to the beginning. So places that have a lot of cul-de-sacs, like in Crystal Tree, they may only have a couple blocks, and some of them are very, very big because of all of the cul-de-sacs along the edge of the property. So we will be able to put temporary blocks in until the actual ones come up. And then we will we'll need to look at all the pre-applications that we have. So we have been taking in applications while the moratorium has been in place. And then when the moratorium date is lifted, we will be able to tell them whether or not they have a slot available. And then we will be able to either give them a license or tell them they're not going to be able to get a license. And the Director of Development Services will be able to develop the rules for implementation of the rental registration programs. Obviously, this will be things that we can't contemplate at this particular moment, so we need to have some flexibility to do that in interpretation. And then the timeline is up there. If you guys are okay with this today, we can have the ordinance on the next board meeting and then begin the implementation on January 1st. We're asking for January 1st rather than the end of the moratorium on the 18th, just to make sure that we work out all the kinks. The map is in pretty good shape. We just have a little bit of quality control to do, and then make sure we get our applications updated and then get the procedures in place. And I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Katsinas.
not really any questions, but I just wanted to thank the working group who did this. You know, a couple of us sat in on them, and you really did a deep dive, and I think that's exactly what we were looking for, you know, and I think we have a rental that has caused a lot of problems, like you said, with unlawful access and to the neighbors that surrounded that property. So I'm really glad that we added that paragraph that they have to be accompanied by. And I know I spoke with Attorney Ann earlier, and there will be significant fines if somebody is found in violation, that they will not be able to get a license for 1 year. So good job. I thank you very, very much.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Healy?
would it be, if someone wanted to get a waiver from these rules, is there a method to apply for it, or is it just not going to happen? I mean, could they say, this is a family rental, it's exigent circumstances, it may require a special consideration?
We haven't contemplated individual waivers from the rules, except in instances, as Steve pointed out earlier, military active duty, snowbirds. There's a couple of instances that we've thought about. The other thing is this won't, anybody who currently has a rental license will be grandfathered in. So no, there won't necessarily be a waiver written into the ordinance. And if things happen to come up while we administer it, we can decide if we need further accommodations.
And then just as a point of clarification, the license are not going to be transferable. The location will not be transferable to a new owner. So when the ownership ceases or it transfers, then they'd have to check to see if one was available on that block and then apply if one was available.
Right.
So it's not automatically renewable or run with the land. It will not run with the land.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Beard?
I also want to comment or appreciate your effort on this. I think it's very important for us. You did a great job of explaining why we're doing it. So people out there who might try to twist this into something that it's not, you did fact-based, you got data, you compared it with other neighborhoods, other towns, which was fantastic. I do have a couple of questions. Was it March that we started the moratorium? To November. What's the response you've been getting from the people who you're telling, they're coming in with applications just saying, we're working on a new system? I mean, how has been the back and forth with them? Are they understanding of our process right now?
So we've been getting applications for two reasons.
Okay.
So one has been someone who's just looking to buy something to rent, and the other have been renter locations that we have discovered that were unlicensed.
Okay.
So they're also on the waiting list right now. So they've now gone through the pre-application process, have gone through whatever training they need to go through. So they've just been told you just can't do it. So
Okay.
I haven't been taking the applications personally, so.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wasn't the one personally taking the application, so I don't know.
We
the
haven't been
response.
getting a bunch of, arguments or flack or people contesting what, the moratorium at this point?
I haven't heard of anything like that, and the list is not very long. It's in the 20s, I think. It wasn't, yeah, something like that.
Okay. And then you said something, people with the current license are grandfathered in. Even though they're grandfathered in to still be able to use the property as rental, they still have to come into compliance. If we pass this, they have to come into compliance with all these various
Well,
provisions.
those people already have
Yeah, so
rental.
they already
licenses,
have-
So they
yeah.
would get to keep them.
They could keep the license, but then they have to still be with, if they're renting it, they still need to be here within 15 miles, all the
Correct.
various.
So those parts, yes.
Yes.
And they're fined if they don't do these certain, okay.
Or they could lose their license
Yeah.
if they don't comply.
Right.
So this would be if there were 3 licenses available on the block, but there happened to be 5 units. So it will remain at 5, and once one of them either sells or changes ownership or decides they want to rent anymore, that'll come off the inventory, and there'll be 4, but there will still not one be available until it gets down to 2.
Got it.
And then we can bring it up to 3, which is what it's supposed to be in this particular example.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Compass?
So I know this board knows this, having dealt with prior incidents, I think, but just for the public to know, what is our current policy or code on the temporary rentals? So the Airbnbs, Verbos, pool party type stuff. I know our position, but I just want to make sure that that's.
Yeah, so we don't actually consider those rental units, that's accommodation. So they have to follow the rules for what a hotel is. So, and they're not allowed in residential districts. I mean, there are some districts where accommodation is allowed, and then they would have to follow the rules for that. And in my perspective, that would be including hotel tax, but, and I'm not doing the enforcement on that. So, yeah, we don't treat the short-term rentals as a residential rental, because that isn't what it is. It's like a hotel.
They're a hotel accommodation, and we don't allow long-term rentals in hotel accommodations or short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals, right. In residential districts.
Any other comments? So it was great work by staff. I was briefed on it before it came to the board some time back and shown all the data and went through it. I can tell you, since I've been here, it's the best work I've seen from staff in the first draft. Sangita did fantastic work pulling all this stuff down. I think we identified, and we're showing the number of rentals that the percentage there is was reported via the census, not necessarily what we have. We don't show that many with our licenses, so there's a gap of what, 600 or 700?
Yeah, and it does vary a little bit because this is sample data, so
Right.
the goal is to get
But-
our numbers closer
But
to
here's a message to anyone who gets this, who watches this or hears this, that has a rental that is not registered with us. You need to sign up and register with us, because if you're not registered and we find you, and we find that you are renting after this goes into place, you will not be able to rent for a year. And there's no exceptions to that. So we want you to register and follow the rules. So, and, you know, this was brought to the floor because in parts of the country, you know, corporate buyers in particular have swooped in. They've bought property sight unseen. They've changed communities from those driven by ownership to those driven by renters. And even though you've seen our numbers have changed some there, if you look at that, that's still like way up at the very top of owner-occupied homes in a community of our size. And as someone who grew up in this town in an apartment, I understand that not everybody wants to be a homeowner, and that being a renter does not necessarily mean that they don't plan to be a long-term resident of Orland Park. I get that. But as you know, Steve mentioned, ownership does tend to lead to more investment in the neighborhoods and in the community. We also know that we tend to have more, in our areas where single-family housing is, you know, more renters, we tend to have more issues with renters than property owners, owner-occupied homes, as far as maintenance codes and that type of thing. That's just a tendency, and I think that's everywhere. People just care more for the things they own in general. That doesn't, there's a lot of renters that care very deeply for where they live, but not all. We don't want to see an overabundance of rentals in an area, which could lead to eroding home values, and we certainly don't want that. So, but we do want to also make sure that there's availability for people who want to rent. So it's important to bring all the facts, investigate this, which you guys did, so we could take some reasonable actions that would allow us and ensure that our neighborhoods don't become overwhelmed with rentals, but at the same time respect people's property rights and ensure that the actions that we take will withstand any potential legal challenges, which we know from our research that they should. So, so good work, and I think this ordinance will do that, so thank you. Anything else from anybody? Great. Go on to the next one.
Baseball field lighting at the John Humphrey Complex.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Reardon.
I move to recommend to the village board to approve the waiver of the competitive bid process in lieu of solicitation of competitive proposals and authorizing the approval and execution of a vendor contract for the purchase and installation of LED lighting at the John Humphrey Complex from Musco Sports Lighting LLC through Sourcewell Contract 041123-MSL based on quote dated October 18, 2024 for an amount not to exceed $1,245,200,000, and to recommend the village board approve the waiver of the competitive bid process in lieu of solicitation for competitive proposals and authorizing the approval and execution of a vendor contract for electrical panel upgrades at the John Humphrey Complex by Davcom Electric through the Omnia/NCPA contract 02-139 based on proposal number 24-16713 dated October 28th, 2024 in the amount of $101,950 plus $20,390 contingency for a total not to exceed contract price of $122,340.
Second.
Did not expect to be that long.
Second.
Any comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Compass.
So just a quick question. I noticed down here that we know that we might get some ComEd rebates as part of this change. Do we have a ballpark idea? And that pun is unintended. of what
Wasn't it
the
100 and a
amount
quarter?
would be.
It was about 115,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, overall, these changes are, definitely going to improve costs. They're going to be proved to be cost effective due to higher energy efficiency, longer lifespan, reduced maintenance costs, compliance with Little League standards. I think this is a no-brainer.
Any other comments? As someone who plays softball still and plays at night, and I've been over and seen this lighting at Schuessler Park, and if you haven't seen it, it's unbelievable. It's like daytime. In fact, the coaches were complaining they had to wear sunglasses during their, and so that's how bright it is. And it doesn't shine on the houses, which is awesome.
And it goes on like that.
Yeah. and
It's
it goes
not like
on-
a
and it
20-minute
goes on
ramp
like-
up.
Right, there's no big weight and all of that. I mean, they're just much better lighting. It's going to be fantastic to have that. It's kind of the final upgrade of that part of that complex. Also, these numbers with the rebate, I think, end up coming in about 250 grand less than we thought it was going to be back in 2020. So that's good. So that's why it's taken us this long, because of that expense. So good work. Call the roll.
Trustee Reardon.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Trustee Campus.
Aye.
Trustee Radiszewski.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Employee health insurance renewal.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Compass.
I move to recommend to the village board to approve the employee medical annual premium in the amount of $6,057,427, an increase of $344,325, or 6.03% from $5,713,102 in 2024, and recommend approving the employee ancillary spend for dental, vision, life, and disability administration in the amount of $517,104, a $30,766 increase, which is a 9.4% increase on dental, 0% increase on vision, disability, admin, and core life and AD&D, adjusting employee contribution equivalents to the increase in premium costs effective January 1st, 2025, and recommend authorizing the village manager to execute said agreements subject to village attorney review.
Second.
Any comments? Well, I guess first we need the presentation. Which I think is pretty short.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Cindy O'Toole. I am here in Mike Wojcik's taking his place. He's homesick. So anyway, we did, the Horton Group did a competitive market analysis. We did go out to, on all lines of coverage this year. And the main driver in healthcare costs have to do with pharmaceutical spend. And so we do see a large increase in GLP-1 drugs, which are like Ozempic. They're used for type 2 diabetics. And these cost on average $1,000 a month. And so those, fortunately, are not hitting your plan too heavily right now. And then there are also gene and cell therapy drugs, and these drugs, on average, are a cost of roughly about $3 million. The village has not seen anything hit their plan. However, there are currently 19 cellular and 13 gene therapy drugs in the market today. There are 200 more that are in late phase, with 4,000 more in line to be approved. So we do know that these are coming down and these can be an additional risk, but despite those negatives in the market, the village did run very close to the target. Right now through September, you're running at 98.4% of expected. We do have 20 large claimants over 50,000, of which 5 are over the $100,000 specific reinsurance limit. And then mid-sized claims fell to 28, and the spend dropped by 186,000. So with the preliminary renewal, we do see a 6% increase of that $344,325. And then we were also able, on the medical side, to increase the pharmaceutical rebates by 53%. And medical trend is running by PricewaterhouseCoopers at 8%, and pharmacy is running to be projected at 10% for 2025. So the 6% increase is really good by the village. As far as everything from administration, we do recommend renewing all plans as is with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. And we did go out to Aetna, Cigna, and UHC, and they all declined to quote this year due to being non-competitive. And then for the stop loss markets, we did go out to 12. We did get 5 quotes, but because you are under 500 employees, we're not able to carve out the stop loss with those carriers, so we just use those for negotiating power. And then on the ancillaries, we did go out to 6 alternative dental carriers. 2 quoted, 3 declined. It is very common this year. We're seeing a lot of decline to quotes because if the rates are good, the ancillary carriers are just nervous about what's happening out there in regards to more on the long term. But the rates are also, if you've got low rates and they're not competitive, they're just not even going to try and present a quote. So dental premium equivalents are recommended to increase that 9.4%, or that $30,000, $766. We did see a lot more usage of the dental insurance this year, and this is consistent with what's going on in the market. And then all other lines came in with a flat renewal for 2025. So does anyone have any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Reardon?
do we have a program where we either encourage or even force participants to use off-brand drugs, not the Super Bowl commercial ones type of thing?
Oh, like the generics and stuff?
Yeah, like the
Yes.
CRX or whatever it's called?
Yeah, the RX plans that are in place, they're all based on the pharmacy prescription drug list that's been put in place by the village. And so part of that program through Blue Cross is they do recommend for generics, there's prior authorizations for the high-cost drugs. So if somebody is a type 2 diabetic, it's not that they can just be prescribed Ozempic right off the get. They do have to have prior authorizations approved so that there's medical necessity. There's also step therapy that gets put in there too, so they may want you to try certain prescriptions as well. And then we do not, as the village, does not allow for weight loss drugs just for cosmetic purposes. So that also helps keep those costs down as well on the pharmacy side. And then if a gene therapy drug were to be utilized, we now have additional stop loss in place through Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they have gone ahead and put in about 15 of them are covered on there. But the member would be assigned a case manager. And then with some of the drugs, you also have to prep a body, like basically the body to take some of these genes because they're literally taking stuff out. So it is a very intensive program, and they will only make sure that the right people are getting it.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily mean whether something should be covered or not covered. I'm not getting into that. Whatever somebody needs, they need.
Right.
What I'm getting at in my other world, I mean, there's exact same drug. I mean,
Oh, yes.
it's the exact makeup. It's made exactly the same with the same amount of parts. But one is, you see the Super Bowl commercial and it
Right.
costs $1,000 a month. And the other one is made in a different plant, but still in the US, still with all our same FDA grade and
Right.
Approved, that costs $50 a month. And just for various
Right,
reasons,
so-
people either don't know or aren't educated enough to take the one that's exactly the same. By every doctor in the world, that'll tell you it's exactly the same.
Right.
But we have incentive programs. We literally have, where we meet with them, we tell them all about it. We give gift cards out, try to get people to switch over. I'm not saying there's a lot of them in
Oh,
our
no,
program,
I know exactly what you're
but it can be
talking about.
very expensive if you can
Right.
reduce a couple of those people.
Right, and so that's what the pharmacy program is put in place, and that's why there's different, basically prescription drug lists that are out there, and the village is on what they call the performance list, which is the most, I don't want to say restrictive, because that's not.
Yeah.
It covers a lot, but it does it eliminates a lot of the high-cost brand drugs. It will put in even low-cost generics. And then they are changing, so Humira, we all know what Humira is, right? So that prescription can cost, in essence, about $90,000 a year. Biosimilars are now being put in place because there are rebates too. And so when you see the rebates, it's all based on Humira wanted to stay competitive in the market, so they increased those rebates. So then it was still cheaper because the rebates were so high for the pharmacies to just offer Humira, which is the brand, instead of the biosimilar. But now there are more biosimilars that are out there. They're not for everybody. Not everybody can take a biosimilar. Skyrizi, and Skyrizi is now being prescribed more. And that in the initial first year is $120,000 because you need 6 doses. And then in remaining years, it's 4. It does prove to have more benefits. It is working, I guess, better. Plus, it's not being taken monthly. It's being taken 4 times a year. So those are consistently changing, but a lot of it is just with the pharmacy, the PBM, and working to make sure you're on the best pharmaceutical drug list.
And that's why I have you, Horton, watching all those things for us
Oh,
every
yes,
year.
we definitely do.
We couldn't keep track of it all. Sorry,
Anything
go.
else?
No, sorry.
Call the roll.
Trustee Campus.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Reardon.
Aye.
Trustee Radiszewski.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Abstain, prior business relationship, which though it ended in 2019, I still abstain from everything related to Horton.
Thank you.
Next item, property and casualty insurance and workers' compensation renewal. Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Compass, or Trustee Malani? I knew it came from over there, I couldn't hear it.
I didn't say me.
I move to recommend to the village board to approve the liability insurance for property in the amount of $305,353, public entity package in the amount $265,533, auto liability in the amount $77,769, excess liability in the amount of $511,390, cyber liability in the amount of $25,861, and effective December 1st, 2024, and recommend approving the excess workers' compensation in the amount of $199,510, crime policy in the amount of $5,161, drone policy in the amount of $16,800, and effective January 1st, 2025, and recommend approving the Horton Group annual brokerage fee in the amount of $35,000.
Second.
Do we have a presentation for this one?
My name's Tony Evans. A quick thank you to Mr. Mayor and the board. Horton's been involved in this program since 2005. There's actually, the next slide is a quick snapshot of Horton, just down the road here. The most important change that we've seen is just this year, Marsh McLennan did buy Horton, and within their agency model, we're still going to be based here, and not much has changed in terms of how we're interacting with our clients. I will tell you that we have almost 700 public sector clients within a 5 or 6 state footprint. And I've been working with the village over the last 5 or 6 years, and I've been doing this a long, long time, since about 1985. So, next slide, please. Okay, we talked a little bit about this last year. Cook County is a problem as it relates to insurers' willingness.
Just stop right there.
Oh, our shot cases back there. Almost done. Our shot.
Is that the breath you took there, Mr. Mayor? I think
About 5 or 6 years ago, there were about 12 to 15 carriers that were willing to write Cook County risks, and that number has dwindled down to about 5 or 6. And some of those even have extremely high deductibles or attachment rates in excess of $1 million. You don't carry that right now. It's $250,000 for property and casualty and $500,000 for workers' comp. But these are, I just put a list of 5 sort of areas that get a lot of attention because of the rate increases that we've seen over the last several years. For obvious reasons on the property. Actually, the program that you're in 2 years ago did a comprehensive, to no additional cost to the village, a comprehensive valuation of not market value, but replacement costs for all of your buildings. And that's been updated. I'll go through those exposure differences in a little bit. Law enforcement legal liability, that's your policeman. Auto liability. Sexual misconduct is getting more and more difficult. Reinsurers don't want to touch that. And excess liability, as I said before, is problematic. And I can talk a little bit about the structure in a little bit with the recommended program. Next slide, please. So, like your health program, we did do extensive marketing for all lines of coverage. And you can see that Cook County, it's either one of 2 things. Cook County, or they can't compete with the pricing. We do give them target pricing and a certain timeline that they need to meet. And given what ICRMT, Illinois County Risk Management Trust, has been able to provide the village, a number of carriers, including Travelers, Liberty Mutual, and a couple of the better known ones, can't compete with the rates that you have currently. Moving on here. So these are the lines of coverage. Cyber is a big deal. We are recommending a change this year. We do have a cyber practice leader that took a look at the forms, and the new carrier is willing to write a cyber extortion sublimit of $1 million. Right now, it's only $250,000. Next slide, please. Workers' comp. Your workers' comp losses have been terrific. I think you are averaging, it sounds like a lot, but it's less than 40 claims or so per year. But again, this is all subject to that $500,000 retention that I talked about earlier. Also with IPRF, which is the Illinois Public Risk Fund, this program has been around quite a while. There's a blurb on it on the next slide, but before we get to that, they do have something called a safety grant, where they do give certain allowances for safety equipment. The last one that you bought had to do with stop and proceed at construction sites. It was, I guess it's a walkie-talkie that was just purchased. So you have $10,000 this year, and for next year, there's $16,000 that IPRF is granting you. Hanover, we recommend to stay on. Oh, sorry, back to the workers' comp. IPRF does not utilize a TPA. They use a company called CCMSI. Actually, and they're the ones that are adjusting your claims. If you're with another carrier, there would be tens of thousands of dollars due to those third-party administrators to take care of those workers' comp claims. Let's go to the next slide, if you would, please. So this is just a quick blurb on ICRMT. Most of our large public entity clients, it's not only cities and villages and counties, but it also includes water treatment facilities, sanitation districts. This started back in 1983, and they have nearly 500 public entities throughout the state that's written now. And they have a unique structure which provides higher limits on an excess basis than the traditional that would, say, someone like Travelers or Chubb would offer. Next slide, please, is IPRF. There's your safety grant at just under $17,000, and this started a few years later than ICRMT. There are a lot of acronyms in my business, I apologize. But IPRF has been around since 1985, and this would be the fourth year renewing with them. Next slide. Okay, so Jim and others wanted me to just talk a little bit about these exposures. This is really your balance sheet protection. This is the things that you own, and it's bodily injury or property damage to a third party. That's, in very simple terms, that's what we're covering here. So your total insured value is your TIV, the village. The replacement cost to rebuild everything would be approximately $281 million. There's something called an inflation factor that's used every year, plus new buildings. So that 281 is increasing to 292 million this year. And actually, if you take the new values times the existing rate, your premium would be 291,000. For the renewal, we're taking a little bit of a bump in the increase in rates and times the multiplied by the new values. And so that rate is going up under 5%, which is excellent by all standards in public entity these days. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, the number of rating bases that these carriers utilize, it might be number of vehicles, it might be number of full-time police, and one of the ones that are used that have some of the most weight to it is village expenditures. Right now, for the current year, it's 204 million, and this is all off your budget. Your premium for the package, that's your liability and your casualty program, that's 232,000. So like the property, if you were to take that current rate times the budgeted for next year, what those expenditures are, that 232,000 would increase to 250,000, and it's $250,000, and so it's a 6% increase over the expiring term. Workers' compensation, I think the easiest way to explain this to you is the village payroll for the current term is 30 million, which is 0.7%. Your premium is 0.7% of your total payroll. The new values are just over 31 million. And if you take the new premium actually going down $5,000, that's 0.6% of the payroll. So it's headed in the right direction. Next slide, please. These are the numbers that we went over and what the changes are. Village expenditures. There's a couple of things I didn't cover. Number of employees is actually going down. How you view seasonal labor as well as temporary part-timers, that comes into play there, but it is going down just a little bit. And the auto values is going up. That's to replace these vehicles from 11 million up to almost 13 million. So that's a 1.7% increase. So there are some increases that we are seeing. It's just not a rate. Next slide, please. And this is the year-over-year premium comparison. So we're seeing an overall, if you look at the very bottom, an overall premium increase of $118,000. One thing I did want to mention, we included last year, you have a pollution policy. That pollution policy runs until the end of the term. You are actually right now having 2 underground storage tanks installed. That should be done by the end of the month. That's for diesel and gasoline. And until those are installed, we cannot, we have to reapply at that time. So you'll be seeing that in the next couple of weeks. So that's why I didn't include it there. But you do have coverage for those. Any questions for me?
Are there any questions? No questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Call the roll.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Campos?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Radiszewski?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye. Oh, excuse me, abstain. Because Horton, again, I have used to have a conflict, and I had a business relationship. They were a client, and I was a customer of theirs until 2019. So I abstained from all things with Horton. So the motion carries 6-0.
Any non-scheduled citizens and visitors for public comment on items relevant to village business?
Okay, anybody here to speak? Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Malani,
move to adjourn?
Second.
call the roll.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Campos?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Radiszewski?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye. We're adjourned. We'll start the board meeting in 10 minutes.